Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. Everything here is great, and I had a good weekend. Did you have a good weekend? Um, Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom came out on Friday. I got my copy in the mail, and I played it some Friday night. I didn't get to play it a ton this weekend, but I did play it some. Em went home to her mom for Mother's Day. My sister took my mom out for Mother's Day weekend, and so I got to spend the weekend hanging out with my dad. And um, that's not something that I've done a lot of. Like Dad and I don't normally like. I'll go up on Sundays. Usually, my mom will go to bingo, and we'll have lunch, and then just kind of chill for a couple hours. But to have like a day, like a full day of Dad, I don't. We don't do that a whole lot. And what I discovered was he was very talkative, and we talked a lot about. He's 78. He turned 78 this year, and so he's seen a lot in this area, and we talk a lot about stuff he saw growing up. I've heard a lot about the various cars he had growing up. If it wasn't obvious, my dad's a car guy, so he had a lot of vehicles growing up that he worked on, built, whatever, and he's always liked to talk about those. So we talked a good bit about that, but I was really interested. He has a much better memory than I do of this city, of this town. Like I can't remember things that were there that got torn down within the last 10 years. Like I don't, or since my childhood. Like there's a whole bunch of changes that have happened, as with any city or town, since I was a kid, and I don't remember them all. He does. Like he has that stuff like in his head. So we talked a lot about that, and one of the things he's mentioned it before, but I didn't realize it was as extensive as it was until lately. Was we used to have a streetcar system, an electric train. This streetcar system is old, like really old, like 1900s or something was when it started. I think maybe even in 1800s. It was an old streetcar system, and when my dad was growing up, so he was born in 45, and that was kind of the heyday for this area. I looked it up, and my county, the county that I currently live in, we currently have like 50,000 people. I think at our peak it was almost 80, like 70 something, and then it was settled around the 60s thousands. Like we're smaller than we used to be. And so in like the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even into the 70s, that was the heyday for this area because the mines were here and there was a whole lot of activity. And I've mentioned it before that Fairmont actually was like a like the center of all of that action. So there was a whole bunch of coal barons and stuff that had hotels here, had big properties, and they would have meetings and stuff here. I didn't realize though. So this streetcar system, he's talked about it before. I expected it to be like a normal trolley, like a just a trolley train that kind of went around the town. What I discovered through talking to him was that trolley, quote trolley, was a full-on like standard scale, standard gauge train, electric train, and it ran all through Fairmont, through our city, and ran down to our neighboring city that's like 20 miles south of us. So it was a pretty extensive passenger network. It was an interurban passenger network. It ran between here and that city in the south, and then it had legs that went off to like side cities. There's a city. It's hard to call it that, but it is technically a city. There are city limits east of here or west of here, northwest of here, called Mannington. That's probably like a few thousand people today, but it was a pretty big area. So there were coal mines kind of scattered, and all of those coal mines spawned up little towns, and so these trains kind of serviced all those things. It allowed rural people to come into town. My dad has always talked about when he was a kid, downtown Fairmont was like a bustling city. Like there was department stores and mom and pop shops and hardware stores and just all like you went to town, you went downtown to do everything. Now, there's, other than like government buildings, there's a state building down there, our courthouse, our libraries down there. There's not really a reason to go there. There's a few small, like cafe type places, but there's really like everything that used to be there moved out from the city center long ago. We got a mall. The mall is technically not even in Fairmont. It's in a town called Whitehall, which is now like actually a town because Walmart's there and they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. And so now they've rebuilt that mall. So that all the shopping moved out of the city center. Fairmont Avenue, which is this long street, which is just kind of a straight shot that goes into downtown. A lot of the businesses just kind of filtered out along that road. Funnily enough, that used to be the streetcar path, the trolley path. And so yeah, it was really fun to talk to Dad about it because growing up, there was a few streets here where they just paved over the rail lines. They literally just, they didn't even take the steel up. They just paved right over it. And I can remember as a kid when it would wear down, you would see it. And there's still areas where you're driving along and there's a big flat area that you don't, like, what is the point of that? Well, that was the trolley. That was the passenger line. And it, you know, you kind of forget about that stuff over the years because it was never a part of my life. It was gone long before I was, well, I don't know, long before, but it was gone before I was born. And I recall seeing the tracks, but I did not recall, like, he mentioned it going along this river stretch out by my uncle's house, and now that he said that, I can remember the, like, raised flat platform that was kind of along, and I always thought that was just a regular train track. Well, I guess it was, because doing this research, I discovered that this was a standard gauge train. It just happened to carry passengers. It did carry freight as well. It had depots along the route. That kind of blew my mind. It was really interesting to think about it, to hear his perspective. He never got to ride on it, but he remembers it. He remembers seeing it. And looking up pictures, like it was a full-scale passenger train. That blows my mind, to think that this area was once busy enough to warrant that. I mean, at the same time, you know, that at that time there was, people didn't have cars, or they had a single car for a family. So if the you know, the homemaker of the family wanted to go get groceries or whatever, they could just get on the train and go into town, that sort of stuff. Or to just, you know, if you didn't want to drive, there was no interstate highway system at that time. The interstate highway system here in West Virginia really didn't get built until like right before, even after I was born. A lot of the interstate work was during that time, so the train was a way to get to Clark. Like otherwise, it's a 45-minute drive to go 20 miles south to the neighboring town. You could just hop on the train and ride. So very cool, you know. I like listening to his stories because he does have such a sharp memory for it. If somebody asked me about what things were like when I was a kid, I don't know. They're the same as they are now. I didn't really think about that stuff, other than the internet, obviously. But it was fun to hear. And also made me stop and think, like, is there, you know, I've been working on this train game, and my train game is surprisingly connected to all of that. Like, it was originally intended to be like a West Virginia train game, and so the map was originally loosely based on this area. But I might revisit some of that and make it a little bit more obvious that it's part of this area, because that's fascinating to me. A little rural public transit system. Never knew that was a thing. What'd you do this weekend? Anything exciting? Do you have you know, trains in your area? I know, like, just having gone to New York recently, it was really fun to ride those around, and to think like it would be so nice if I could get on a train and ride to New York instead of having to drive over there or whatever. It would just be so comfortable and so convenient that it really sucks that we don't have good passenger rail systems here. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. and I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is rapprochement. That is a noun meaning the reestablishment of friendly relations between nations following a period of hostility. Lydia spoke at length about how rapprochement between the United States and some former Soviet nations has been a real boon to her family's prestige and wealth. Rapprochement. R-A-P-P-R-O-C-H-E-M-E-N-T. Book's kind of old. Definitely don't think there's any rapprochement going on right now between those two countries.